I'm Brittany. This is Arthur. Am I even over in the center? But welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch and read gay things. Today, we continue reading The Summer Palace. Today, we also finally get to read the short story called Pet. This will actually take the entire stream today, or rather, it should. And I actually got a glance at the first line, and I think this one's gonna be a banger. We read for a couple of hours. We usually take a break around somewhere in the middle, where you get to go back to the Gaywatch break room that you just came from. And there are content warnings and trigger warnings found down in the description. In case you're just so happening to drop in, this would be a wild time to drop in. But in case you're new here, we do indeed have trigger warnings for this series down in the description. I'm just kind of knocked over by this first sentence here. This is this short story that covers Ansel and what the heck is his name? Berenger. For whatever that means, I had read the series. If I read this, I have no memory of it, like zero at all. And we all know that I usually can't remember things anyway, but this particularly blank. I only barely remembered kind of a couple of things about the short story called The Summer Palace. I got nothing about anything else. So we are now firmly into reaction territory. So Ansel was a virgin the first 12 times he had sex. The 13th time, it lacked all plausibility. He tried something different. I shouldn't. Lord Arden owns my contract. Oh, fuck, you're a noble's pet. The voice behind him was more turned on than ever. Ansel could feel the hard cock of the merchant's son rubbing against him through layers of fabric. Pets were exclusive commodities, and a pet under contract was forbidden. You could buy out my contract. How much? He made up a figure. There was no Lord Arden. Ansel landed his first contract that day, 3 months of his time signed over to the merchant's son. At the end of it, he was gifted a peridot, the color of his eyes, green as emeralds, but not as expensive. Yet. Excuse me, what? We're gonna make a note of the opening of this, because for a variety of reasons, this is a fantastic opening to any story. Of course, that means that I literally now have a note written down on my pad right here that just says pet opening, which we're not going there. That was a scene break, by the way. The servant who dressed him told him what he needed to know about clothes, and the etiquette was easy. Watch, copy, or else make his own rules. In the brothels of Saint-Pelier, he had already learned the most important question. Who is the richest man here? You know, this is, in hindsight, now that I know that this is really what this short story is about, a very necessary addition to digging even deeper into this whole pet world and situation. And no better way to do it, really, than with Ansel. Ansel turned down the first flurry of offers for his contract. He let the merchant's son parade him about, show him off, let desire build among the acquaintances they had dined with during the day and the young hotheads they drank with at night. The richest man in the province was the trading magnate Luan, and Ansel knew that the merchant's son and his father were seeking a gift to open business talks with him. Give me as your gift, said Ansel, on the sheets, his body still flushed, his red hair sweat-tussled. What? Said the merchant's son. Give me to Luan for the night. I'll get you your trade deal. reminds me of I can't think of his name. But if you've read Urha, or even read enough of Urha, you know the character I'm thinking of, who reminds me of Ansel. I just can't immediately summon his name. But oh man, big energy. Rongju? Was it Rongju? I think so. That sounds right. Yeah. Since the only jewelry Ansel owned was not impressive, he wore neither ornaments nor paint when he was brought to Luan's room. He wore nothing at all, except for a bolt of green silk wrapped around his waist when he arranged himself in a sprawl on the bed. Luan was a man of 46 years, more than twice Ansel's age. Ansel had never been inside a residence as grand as this one. He had thought the merchant's son was wealthy when he'd first seen him in the brothel. He had thought, that's the richest man in the province. Now he knew his own limited experience of the world. The merchant's entire house was the size of Luan's entrance hall. Ansel's heart beat. Oh, excuse me. That's why. It wasn't all one word. Ansel's heart beat quickened as Luan entered, a dark shape in the doorway. Luan owned this residence and everything in it. The gold candlesticks, the rich tapestries depicting hunts and gardens, the patterned tile, the green silk on the bed, and what lay under it. "You kept me waiting," said Ansel. He felt the dip as Luan sat beside him on the bed. "Your master chose his gift well. I like rare things." Luan reached out with easy ownership and took a lock of Ansel's hair between his fingers. "Is it red everywhere?" "Guess," said Ansel. Holding Luan's gaze, Ansel took the man's hand and guided it down under the silk. "Can you tell by feel?" The offer came 2 days later. A year's contract at 10 times the rate paid by the merchant's son. Ansel smiled. Luan was still only a merchant, but he went to parties with aristocrats, and now Ansel had a sense of scale. Am I just going to be gagged this whole short story? Oh my god. Whew. He walked into Lord Ruar's gathering on Luan's arm, and every head in the room turned. Only the richest merchants had pets, copying the manners of the aristocracy. A pet was a symbol of status. It was not only that Ansel's contract was expensive, so was his clothing, his jewelry, the constant gifts tradition demanded be lavished on him. Owning a pet was a pure display of wealth. Look what I can afford. No merchant in Luan's acquaintance could afford Ansel. They all talked about him. "I'd pay a fortune to have him," and "you'd need a fortune, that's Luan's pet." Ansel liked the attention and he liked the gifts. He liked the feel of silks, furs, and velvets against his skin. He liked to be attended by his own servants. He liked the rarity and expense of the jewels. He was given 3 emeralds to wear in his ears, a silver chain for his ankles, a pendant to wear around his neck. He kept them all in a jewel box, also a gift. It was inlaid with mother of pearl. He kept his old single peridot there, too, but at the bottom. He had affected a better accent to cover up his provincial lilt, letting the rumor mill go wild. He was a foreign pet. He was a court pet. He was the younger son of an aristocrat playing a pet for fun. His ears were pierced, 3 sharp pricks. His hair stayed long but was cut in a fashionable style. His body was bathed and steamed and waxed, and on the evenings when he was entertaining Luan privately, it was washed far more intimately and oiled to allow Luan to slide home. When he looked at himself in the mirror now, he no longer saw a boy from a brothel who could be had for a few coins, but something far more expensive, more polished, and more desirable, particularly when his face was daubed with paint. He saw the same thing now, reflected in the acquisitive gleam in Lord Ruar's eyes. Luan bowed to Lord Ruar deeply. Lord Ruar was far above him in status, and richer too, the host of this evening's entertainments. Ansel didn't bow. He just looked at Lord Ruar. As Luan bowed, their eyes met. Behind Lord Ruar, lounging on a reclining couch like an ornament, was a gorgeous brunette pet of about 19 years of age, covered in diamonds. He regarded Ansel with eyes of exquisite boredom, a long, scrolling look, as if unimpressed by the quality of Ansel's jewels, his silks, his paint. Underneath the boredom was black jealousy. Ansel murmured an excuse and took himself out into the lamplit gardens. He already knew the answer to the question, "Who is the richest man here?" And sure enough. "It's Luan's pet," said Lord Rouar, strolling up with his companions. Ansel found himself encircled by Lord Rouar and his entourage, a scattering of minor nobility. "I've never had a redhead," said Lord Rouar. "Try me out," said Ansel. Electric silence. The exhilarating static before lightning in a thunderstorm. He had scandalized even these jaded courtiers. A pet who'd cheat on his contract? In shocked tones. "Try you out?" It was delicious insolence, dancing on the edge of propriety, when everyone here was bored. "Put your pet in the ring with me. I'll pretend he's you." I am. I'm just gonna be gagged this whole fucking thing. Amazed laughter came from one of the minor nobles. Ansel's eyes were only on Lord Rouar. He had riveted the attention of everyone here, and he knew it. They didn't know what to make of him. Unpredictability excited them. "I've never done it in public before," said Ansel. "You'd be my first." He was readied in an antechamber. Through the door that was ajar, Ansel could glimpse the makeshift ring of chairs surrounding a circle of patterned floor tile. There was a close, prurient atmosphere, aristocrats murmuring to one another their salacious expectations. His first performance. Ansel knew what happened in the ring. Pets fucked. Sometimes they faked a struggle first. The one on top got to stick it in. The one on the bottom pretended to like it, or pretended to hate it, or pretended to hate it then like it, depending on their own performance style and how they judged the mood of the room. Brought out in front of the audience, he saw flashes of silk, whispers behind hands. Lord Rouar had taken the best seat, right at the front. He saw at once that the crowd liked him, partly because he was new, partly because of his looks, partly because the story of his challenge to Lord Rouar had spread like wildfire. The crowd also seemed to like Lord Rouar's pet, that pouty boy covered in diamonds, who, from the catcalls and comments, was something of a crowd favorite. Ansel, on the other hand. Ansel hadn't been lying when he'd said he'd never done it in public before. Luan liked it with Ansel face down in the bedroom. The merchant's son had once drunkenly grabbed at him at a public gathering, but had not done much more than hump at him. In the brothels, it had been mostly behind a curtain. His heart was pounding. He knew what he had to do. He walked right into the ring, waving off the attendant, and said to the diamond boy in a cool voice, "Strip." The crowd liked it. There were encouraging calls, applause. Ansel waited for "make me," but the boy was playing his own games, because instead of refusing, he held Ansel's gaze, lifted a hand to his laces, and deliberately parted his shirt. Fabric slid from a shoulder. A susurration of silk, and everything came off except the diamonds. No one was looking at Ansel. "You're not going to take him away from me, you slut," said the boy sweetly, murmuring the words too quietly for anyone else to hear. "Too late," said Ansel. The first stages were performed somewhat by rote. They each knew how to make it look hot rather than professional, positioned to show things off to best advantage. Lord Rouar's pet shone, flushed cheeks, breathy little moans. It was why he was a favorite. Everyone wanted to fuck him, to be the one to get him to make those sounds. Ansel's pulse was accelerating wildly, not because of the pet's performance, but because of what he was about to do. He pushed the pet's face down to the polished rosewood floor and positioned himself. Then he looked up, looked right into Lord Rouar's eyes, and said it loud enough for every noble in the crowd to hear. "Spread your legs, Rouar." He felt the pet under him jerk in startlement and pushed him back down. The crowd erupted, a wild, shocked reaction as they realized what was about to happen. "Put your pet in the ring with me. I'll pretend he's you." Ansel kneed the pet's legs apart. He heard a laughing voice say, "Fuck him, Red." He could see Lord Ruar's face, equal parts turned on, humiliated and furious, and he knew he had him. Lord Ruar was going to bid for him. Ansel was about to screw him in front of everyone, and Lord Ruar's rivals were going to bid as well, for the same reason. "You take cock like a pet," said Ansel. He closed his eyes as he pushed in. It really did feel good. More so when he opened his eyes again and Lord Ruar was still staring violently at him. He let the sound of desire come deliberately from his throat. Rhythmical sounds, deliberately indulging himself. Was this how men felt fucking him? No wonder they paid a fortune for it. Take it, like that. He had the audience's hot, scandalized attention. He could feel how much they liked it. Fucking Lord Ruar, fucking every lord here. Being watched by everyone while he did it was like a blinding white light. Ansel pulled out, flipped the boy over, aimed his own cock downwards with a hand, and came all over the boy's face, getting his long lashes sticky. Choices were made. The room exploded in approval, cheers, calls of his name, and I'm sure other things. He could hear shouts of suggestions, ribald calls to Lord Ruar in the thick excitement of the crowd. He felt shivery with triumph, and had to ignore the sensitivity of orgasm still on him as he rose, his legs unsteady. "How was he?" came the amused call from somewhere in the audience. Ansel gave Lord Ruar a single taunting look, playing to the crowd as he said, "I've had better." The heated snarl of a look Lord Ruar gave him in return was like victory. Of course, Ansel still had 6 months of contract remaining with Luan. A bidder would need the agreement of both Luan and Ansel to buy that contract out, but Ansel would accept the highest offer, had angled for it, could hardly wait for it, and Luan was just a merchant. He would not say no to a lord. On the sidelines, Ansel was bundled into a sheer silk wrap. He felt it on his still sensitive skin before he was taken to an antechamber, a bidding war erupting behind him. In the antechamber, he closed his eyes and breathed and smiled and was ready when Luan entered behind him. "Congratulations," Luan said, only a little bitterly. He may have been outmaneuvered by his own pet, but the deal overall reflected well on him. "Your career is made." Whose bid was highest, Ruar or one of his rivals? "Neither," said Luan. "It was Lord Berenger." "Berenger?" said Ansel. He didn't know the name. He thought he knew everyone from this region. "I don't know him." He thought over the men he'd seen tonight, the spectators among the stands. Which one was Lord Berenger? And then he heard the amount that had been offered, and his eyes flew wide. A year's contract to an aristocrat at a fee that had everyone talking. "He's given you a week to say your goodbyes and wrap up any business," said Luan. "No. Send me to his rooms right away," said Ansel. "Tonight." That was a scene break. Holy shit! He was taken through a series of 3 antechambers in the dim light, then made to wait, alongside an old manservant called Parsons, in front of a large wooden door. He could feel the spark of success, the anticipation that spiked his pulse and made his heart pound. It felt like validation, the climax to his actions in the ring. He was going to meet his new owner, and his new owner was going to fuck him. He had washed only what was necessary, and stayed in his silks from the ring, loosening them slightly, leaving his paint a little smudged, his lips and eyelashes heavy with it. The doors opened, and he got his first look at Beringer. Beringer was a man of perhaps 30 years of age, austerely dressed, with strong features and dark eyes passing over a sheaf of papers at the desk. He was clean-shaven, as was the current fashion, and he wore his dark hair short as well. He looked serious, even stern, his expression one of intent concentration. The room itself was small and intimate, containing a reclining couch and a desk with a rich walnut patina and tapered feet. The desk was covered in papers and was the focus of the room's light, 3 lamps that were all lit. Ansel leaned his body against the door column, let the light touch him just so, let his silk garment fall open to his waist, though not beyond. He knew how he looked, the elegant line of his body, his green eyes under sultry lashes, his nipples slightly pinked with paint. "So, you saw me in the ring, and decided that you just had to have me," said Ansel. Beringer looked up. "No, I hate the ring." The words were matter-of-fact. "Parsons, hand me my jacket." "So it was just me," said Ansel. "I told Luan that you had a week to set your affairs in order." Beringer had returned his papers to the desk and was shrugging into the jacket that Parsons held out for him. "I couldn't stay away, once I heard it was you." Ansel came into the room, his skin fresh, the silk almost slipping from his shoulders, like a flower waiting to be plucked. He felt the pulse of possibility that hung between 2 people in a small, intimate room, his body prepared and ready. "My household is traveling back to Varennes tonight. You can travel with them. I'm riding to Lador? That's my first best attempt. I'm riding to Lador. Parsons will take care of whatever you need. Clothing, jewelry." Ansel blinked. "Your household is traveling back to Varennes, but you're not?" "How old are you?" As if Ansel hadn't spoken. 16. Beringer gave him a flat look. 20, said Ansel, the truth coming out with a flash of annoyance that he had to work hard to keep out of his voice. He heard the slightly waspish tone and purposefully smoothed the frown from his forehead. "Was Luan your first contract?" "No, there was one other, a regional merchant, for 3 weeks." He felt off kilter. Was that the wrong thing to have said? Having a contract with a regional merchant didn't sound appealing at all. He tried to recover. "And you?" said Ansel in his most velvet voice. "Now that you have me, what are you going to do with me?" "I'm riding to Lador." Beringer was walking right past him. Was he leaving? "Parsons will help you settle in at the fort. I'll arrive there in 2 weeks. Good night." Ansel stared as Beringer walked out the door. It opened and closed, just like Ansel's mouth, as he was left standing alone with Parsons in an empty wing of the residence. Yes. 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 Everything about this setup. Yes. There are chapters to this one, so that was the end of chapter 1. Henry, you can't be saying Kinky Mr. Darcy to me. You must be less funny. At once, Ansel identified his mistake. Beringer was serious. His clothes were serious. His servants were serious. His fort was serious. Ansel didn't need Parsons to tell him. He could see it the moment they arrived. Here was the library full of the tales of Isagoras and other boring people. Here were the stables full of unappealing horses, part of Beringer's equine breeding program. Beringer's rooms were positively austere, the furnishings expensive but not extravagant, his clothing dark and stuffy, designed not to draw attention. Of course Beringer had not responded to sophistication and debauchery, a pet straight from the ring dripping with jewels and paint. Ansel had seen with his own eyes that Beringer owned 6 identical copies of the same brown jacket. Ansel at once immersed himself in boring. Parsons was happy to talk. Beringer preferred plain fare, simple meats and bread. Beringer's horses were at the center of his attention. His favorite hunter was the dappled gray. Beringer prized loyalty above all qualities in his friends. Setting riders to keep daily lookout, Ansel was the first to receive word that Berenger was on his way home. Ansel quickly washed the paint from his face and changed his clothes. Then he positioned himself in a chair in one of the antechambers near Berenger's rooms and waited, with the fire lit, a lamp glowing beside him, and one of the big illuminated books from Berenger's library open on his lap. Man, Ansel always understands the assignment, which is funny because as much as he is understanding the assignment, it's like you get the overwhelming feeling that it's not quite the assignment, that Berenger doesn't even want to give him an assignment. You know what I mean? Whew. He was dressed in a loose shirt of simple white linen and plain trousers, his red hair tied back in a casual tail, with a single leather tie. He looked up when he heard footsteps and then stood quickly, closing the book. An unaffected young man, pardon me, an unaffected young man, rising startled to greet his friend. "My lord," said Ansel, "I'm sorry, you took me by surprise." "No, that's all right. I came back early." Berenger stopped and looked at him, taking in the new way Ansel looked, and Ansel thought, bullseye. I almost didn't recognize you," said Berenger, without all the... "Oh, this," a hand to his muscly tied-back hair. "I wasn't expecting you back so early. I'm sorry, I'm too excited. Let's try that again. I wasn't expecting you back so early. I can change into something more... No, you look handsome." Berenger stopped and shook his head. "That is, when we're not at functions, you should feel free to wear whatever you like." "I'm rather enjoying that you look handsome comment now." Oops, he let it slip. "Thank you, my lord," said Ansel. It was Berenger who took a step forward. "You're reading Isagoras." Berenger was looking at the discarded book with its scrollwork pages. He looked up at Ansel in surprise. "What do you think of him?" Ansel couldn't read. But he had planned all this from the moment Parsons had pointed the book out to him. "I've never seen the White Cliffs, but I think they sound beautiful." Berenger's eyes warmed a fraction further. Ansel quickly stepped forward. "My lord, I shouldn't be wasting your time with poetry. Let me take that for you." He took Berenger's riding jacket from his hands. "Have you eaten? I can call for a small supper." He was already calling for food to be brought, nothing rich or ornate as he would have ordered for Luan, but the plain fare he now knew Berenger enjoyed. Freshly cooked breads, cheese and meats, a simple local cider. "Stay and join me," said Berenger. Ansel ate the plain food with the good manners of a merchant's son, and none of the teasing flirtation that marked his own profession. They talked about Isagoras. Ansel had heard men waffle on about Isagoras before, so he knew just what to say. When he didn't know what to say, he knew how to gaze into Berenger's eyes and ask questions. Then Ansel stood and demurred that Berenger ought to rest. Berenger smiled ruefully and said Ansel was right, but he hoped they would talk again. Apologizing for his tiredness and looking genuinely regretful, Berenger left for bed. I cannot believe... The next day, Ansel went out to the stables. He navigated the dust and the unpleasant smells and the horrible sounds. Ansel ignored every screaming instinct that was telling him to flee, and put himself into the stall of a gray, spotty horse. He broke out into a cold sweat when it nosed his chest, then forced himself to put a hand on its neck. Soon enough, a familiar voice. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" "She's wonderful." He felt the presence of Berenger in the stall behind him. "Do you ride?" "No. That is, I've always wanted to learn, but never had the opportunity." Berenger put a hand on the horse's neck, near his own. "I could teach you." Really? I'd love that, said Ansel. A scene break. He woke the next morning with his body screaming in protest. A few hours of horse riding seemed to have set every muscle in his thighs and back into agony. He limped about his own rooms, cursing all animals, but smiled and forced himself to walk normally when he came down for breakfast. He covered the wince every time he stood up or sat down. Twinging a bit, Berenger said. A bit, he smiled. He thought he could still smell horse and ignored it. Servants brought out breakfast, a selection of different offerings. Ansel wanted the cake, but took the plain bread and ate it. Berenger sat back in his chair, watching Ansel approvingly. I think it's wonderful that you want to learn to ride. I've heard that pets sometimes accompany the nobility on hunts, said Ansel. You'll need a good hunter to do that. There's a mare I think would be perfect for you, a strawberry roan. I'd be honored for you to have her, said Berenger. And then, what is it? Your first gift, said Ansel, with a sweet smile, covering the stirrings of victory. My lord. Another scene break. This is way too much goddamn fun. I am having way too much fun. It happened in the library one night several weeks later, as Berenger was talking about politics. Ansel nodded and half listened while Berenger said, blah blah the prince, blah blah the alliance with Achilleus. Then, in the pause, Ansel looked at Berenger with sincerity in his eyes. You want to be loyal to the prince, said Ansel, but the rumors trouble you. Berenger looked over at him in surprise. In the end, aren't we all looking for someone to be loyal to, said Ansel, softly. There was a long moment of nothing but the sound of the flames from the nearby fireplace and the warmth of Berenger's brown eyes. Is that what you want? Said Berenger. It's what I never thought I'd find, said Ansel, until I met you. This boy and it was happening, finally. It was finally happening. And the two of them drawing closer in the firelight, Ansel's arms sliding around Berenger's neck, leaning into... Ansel, no. They were staring at each other from 2 paces away. What had gone wrong? He had read Berenger right. He was sure that he had read him right. There was a terrible, awkward silence. You may have made assumptions, Berenger spoke first, not looking at him, after I bid you in the ring, but For a moment, Ansel didn't understand, and then suddenly the rejections and the refusals made sense. It doesn't have to be like it was in the ring, Ansel said in a rush, relieved to have discovered the root of the problem. He hastened to reassure Berenger. I don't have to be the one who does that. He waited for Berenger to get it. Berenger didn't seem to get it. You can fuck me, Ansel explained. Berenger's eyes went wide. Was that the wrong thing to say? I've always done it that way before. It's what I'm good at. That was the wrong thing to say, too. I mean, I want you. That was better. He should have said that first. I want you. He moved a step closer, made it personal. The way you want me. Ansel, you don't have to. I told you, I want you to. That isn't what I want. Then what do you want? Ansel said, in pure frustration. It just came out. A part of Ansel knew he should be horrified at himself for allowing his annoyance to show so plainly in his face, in his voice, and on his face. But the rest of him had worked hard for weeks in this fruitless pursuit of a man with all the responsiveness of a blank wall. He thought of all the endless horse rides and the slices of plain bread and Isagoras and all the boring books Berenger had recommended that he had pretended to have read. He found himself with his hands on his hips staring angrily at Berenger. Berenger stared back at him. "In 6 weeks," began Berenger, "I'm attending court. As a single man, I need a pet to attend dinners and functions with me, for propriety's sake. That is all. I don't expect intimacy in private. In fact, I prefer in private that you and I..." Court? Like a flower inclining towards sunlight. Ansel's whole attention swung to the thought. He barely heard the rest. "You're taking me to court?" "Yes." "The royal court? At Arles?" "Yes." For a moment, Ansel preened, thinking of the capital, the center of fashion, of entertainments, of the aristocracy and Venetian elite, and then he remembered who he would be going with. "Well, I'm going to need a lot more jewels," Ansel said, his annoyance returning with a snap. "I know you like boring young men in cotton shirts, but I can't wander around the palace looking like this." Berenger was staring at him again, like Ansel was a stranger he was meeting for the first time. "Not wrong. Run with that feeling, Berenger." Ansel lifted his chin. "What?" "I intend to make the most of our time at court. I am incredibly good at my chosen profession. Not that you know that." It's possible I didn't realize how good until now. Berenger was still gazing at him with that new look in his eyes. After a long moment, "Do you even like horses?" "I can't read," said Ansel. "I see," said Berenger. The next morning, Ansel threw away the plain white shirt and the simple leather hair tie, and came down to breakfast in the clothes that he liked, exquisite silks and velvets that felt good against his skin, wearing his hair pampered and long and out. Berenger didn't say, "I see," but the implication was there in the heavy weight of his regard as he looked at Ansel across the table. Ansel lifted his chin, ignoring all the uninspired foods that Berenger liked and biting into a fruit tart. Since the boringness and the writing and the poetry didn't work, he wasn't going to waste his time with them. He was going to court. Court. It was the heart of events and fashion, and he'd be surrounded by the richest lords in Vere. "The horse I chose for you has arrived," said Berenger. "She's a strawberry roan named Ruby. I wonder if you'll like her." "I like actual rubies," said Ansel. "I see," said Berenger. When the jewelsmith visited, Berenger simply said to her, "Show him the most expensive thing that you have." See, this is where it gets you. Ansel, now thinking, "Oh, okay, I don't have to put on a show for this guy, so I'm just going to drop it and do whatever I want to do," thereby revealing his actual self for Berenger to, I don't know, get to know. I'm all right. I really can't stop smiling. I'm having there's it's all just way too much fun. Okay. For his part, Ansel stopped trying to seduce Berenger and started enjoying himself. He had Berenger buy him new clothes and jewels and threw himself into preparations for his debut at court, peppering Parsons with questions about all the new styles. Berenger remained boring and serious, but it was good for Ansel's reputation that Berenger did not have other lovers. Ansel was Berenger's only pet, with no danger of a rival. Berenger spent his evenings reading and then retired alone. Perhaps Berenger preferred women. Ansel had suspected that of Luan, who had liked him face down with his hair out. Pets played at that all the time. There were brothels for that kind of thing, too. But it was very like Berenger to stoically maintain celibacy rather than frequent any of them. Ansel knew that much from the endless rides out into the surrounding villages, where Berenger still insisted Ansel accompany him. Every commoner in the province had a story about Lord Berenger. Berenger had remembered the name of their cousin's child. Berenger had stayed with them through the birth of their prize colt. Berenger had helped him with the purchase of equipment when they had none, saving the harvest. Perhaps the reason Beringer had no lover was that he was too tired after meeting every person in the province and memorizing all of their names. The court, Beringer began to explain to him 2 days before they departed, is very different. The entertainments can be debauched. I've seen pets fucking before, said Ansel. I am a pet, remember? I'll cover your eyes if you're shocked. No, I meant that the court has changed, said Beringer, shaking his head. Since the king died. The regent's influence... You worry too much, said Ansel. Are we getting an answer to the... We were talking about that in the book chat before the stream. We specifically talked about the regent's influence on how pets work at court, and if like child pets was the thing that he introduced or a taboo that he just made, well, not mainstream, because it was very specifically kind of noted that he definitely had the youngest pets of anyone at court. I don't remember any other courtier or noble having anyone that young. So, but we just had this discussion. Are we really going to see? He said the regent's influence. Are we going to see? This is great. This is great. This is great. This is great. That was the end of the chapter. We're at chapter 3. And actually, you know, we're coming up on... Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. So we're coming up on 4, which is usually around the time that we, that we take our break. Did I say chapter 4? I did. We're coming up on chapter 3. Wow. We're coming up on chapter 3. Let me check real quick to see how long it is so that I can judge. All right. Okay, it's a little bit long. Yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll take our break now, and then we'll come back to see the regent's influence at court. Given the timing, I think somebody said that this was like pre-book 1, and that's definitely, that's got to be the case. This is pre-book 1, when the regent first established the alliance with Archelos, and da-da-da-da-da. And so we hopefully get to learn more about what exactly the regent changed when he got into the court. I'll be back in just a few minutes to pick up the second half of this stream. Alrighty, I'll be back in just a bit. And we are back with more of the Summer Palace, the collection of short stories from Captive Prince and that entire world, namely, a lot of the time, the world of pets. And we seem to be exploring that to rather brilliant effect with Ansel right now. So, we are on page 116 for chapter 3 of this short story. And I couldn't be happier, frankly. I couldn't be more pleasantly surprised than I am right now. So, he remembered walking into Luan's halls for the first time, the way he had felt shivery standing in the biggest room he had ever seen. The palace was like that, surpassing all the pictures in his head. He stepped out of Berenger's carriage and looked up. The high-flung turrets were white and gold and seemed to shine in the light, like the glinting banners that flew, rising high above Aral. There were sculpted figures in miles of windows and great steps that led up and up. It was thrilling when palace staff came out to greet them, when they were taken in through halls and up wide marble stairs to the rooms where they would take up residence, 2 servants pushing open the double doors. Inside, Berenger's palace rooms were glorious, rooms upon rooms which flowed on from one another, with high ornamented walls and ceilings, ornate floors with blue and gold tiles, and a second set of gilded doors, themselves covered in carvings depicting the stages of a hunt. Wait, I'm just now realizing, with all of the other just A-plus tropes flying around right now, since he just wants Ansel for appearances, we're getting a little fake dating thrown in there, kind of as well, to say nothing of the rather obvious parallels to Pretty Woman. Ansel walked in almost in a daze, too overwhelmed to affect nonchalance. Servants were streaming in with him, opening jeweled cabinets and laying out their things. He moved from one point to another, marveling at each ornament. Berenger gestured to the room that ran directly off this one, saying, "That one's yours." "Mine," said Ansel, and flung himself down happily among the cushions and billowing silk on the bed there, thinking that he must from now on always live in beautiful surroundings just like this. When he squirmed around to face the room, he saw that Berenger was watching him. "What?" said Ansel. "Luxury I literally... We're gonna try that again. "What?" said Ansel. "Luxury suits you," remarked Berenger. "I think so too," said Ansel in blissful agreement. He had servants dress him with particular care, diaphanous silk, jewels, the paint on his face glittering gold. Ansel caught glimpses of himself and Berenger in the shining surfaces on the walk into the presentation room. Together they looked just as a pet and owner ought to look. Berenger austere, serious, alongside a spectacular, gleaming display of his own wealth. The hall was thronging with courtiers, the crush thickest near the throne. Berenger was just one of several arrivals greeted by the regent, though he was one of the more important ones. Ansel felt proudly conscious of every pair of eyes on him, his beauty set off to best advantage. He quickly identified the pets, pleased to see several of them whispering behind their hands and giving him looks full of jealousy. More people were looking at him than at Berenger, and no other pet in the hall was being given as much attention. He could hear the murmurs of speculation. Who was the new pet? How had he come to serve Berenger? The regent was an impression of royal silks edged in ermine, since, as a pet, etiquette dictated Ansel's gaze be pinned to the floor. Berenger approached, knelt, murmured a few words. Ansel stayed many steps back in deep obeisance as this happened, but he was still presented. Berenger then knelt for the prince, who was standing to the left of the throne, a severe young man, in harsh clothing. Then they were backing away from the throne, the presentation done. Ansel's heart was soaring. He almost didn't hear when Berenger said to him, awkwardly, Tonight there will be a dinner and entertainments. It will be expected that you and I, that is... Are you worried I'll be shy? Ansel reached out and hooked his finger into the tight lacings that crisscrossed over Berenger's chest, drawing him forward a step. As the glances of a dozen curious courtiers turned their way, he slid his arm around Berenger's neck and murmured into his ear, I'll make every lord in the palace want to be you. Want to be you and want to bid for me. It was so easy to play at pet that Ansel gave flirting with Berenger only half of his mind, the rest of him drinking in the fashion, the entertainments, and the attention he was garnering from all sides. Lord Orsin stopped by and requested an introduction, bowing low as he took Ansel's hand and saying, I see Berenger's landed one to watch. Lord Drouet looked at him openly from across the table, ignoring his own pet. I don't think it would be Ralin. But we'll go with that. Lord Ralin asked, was it true what they'd heard about Ansel and Lord Rouar in the ring? Whatever you've heard, said Ansel, I was better. Berenger, Lord Ralin laughed. Tell me when his contract's up. I'm wild to bid for him. In between, Ansel flattered Lord Drouet just the right amount for him to look favorably on Berenger's trade propositions. Lady Aguerre had a horse program Berenger was interested in, so Ansel made her feel like the most important person in the world. And when everyone was talking about the prince, and the conversation swerved uncomfortably towards the new Achiellan alliance, Ansel stepped in and told the whole table a risque story he'd heard about Achiellan bed practices, diverting attention. Even Berenger laughed when he got to the punchline. Berenger, you dark horse, you've got the best pet in the room, Lord Drouet said. Well, said Ansel, giddy with pleasure as they entered their rooms. Berenger was smiling, and in the next moment he was at a low side table, picking something up, some sort of bundle of pale cream silk, that he tossed to Ansel. Here, said Berenger, as Ansel caught the small silk pouch that was startlingly heavy. Ansel pulled the ties open and gasped at what lay inside, a long string of emeralds. You've more than earned a gift, said Berenger. They were beautiful. A clear, deep green cut in smooth geometric patterns, each angle gleaming, and he'd seen pets today in their jewels, and knew this was as rich a gift as any of them. I love them. Ansel was overflowing with happiness, and it felt infectious, spilling out into his words and into Berenger's new smile. Watching him. I love them, said Ansel. I'd sleep with you right now. I might even enjoy it for once. He stopped. High praise, said Berenger dryly. Of course, with you, I'd... Oh, of course, said Berenger. Literally, almost verbatim an exchange that happens in Pretty Woman. And I mean that as the highest compliment. If you want the hetero version of this, by and large, if you want the hetero version of this and you haven't seen Pretty Woman, you need to see Pretty Woman. In the mornings, Ansel attended Berenger, his petly duty. It took perhaps half an hour to dress Lord Berenger fully, arranging fabric and tucking in laces, plus extra time to see his hair. Ansel would have liked to have added some small flourish here or there, but Berenger resisted all his attempts to add jewelry, or ornamentation, or color to his clothing. Another day, another brown jacket. In blue or red, you could look quite handsome. It was something Ansel had noticed on the third morning, in the early light from the window. Berenger had a strong profile, good bone structure, and warm eyes. His waist, where Ansel was lacing, was trim, his body fit from riding. Let me pick your jacket. Berenger sounded amused. You don't like my jacket? I like my taste better than yours, obviously, said Ansel. Obviously, said Berenger. He didn't let Ansel pick his jacket. They attended dinners together. They had a good system in which Ansel filched the delicious confectionaries and special sweets and left Berenger all the plain stuff he preferred. Oh, no, it's almost like their differences complement each other and like they fit together as a result. Oh, no, that's terrible. After dinner, Berenger had a series of boring, serious conversations with other lords, or disappeared off into meetings, while Ansel liked to watch the pet performances, or stroll the halls or gardens with one of his growing number of admirers. Once or twice, he picked up gossip that he knew Berenger would like and passed it back to him, and on one of his turns around the garden he made a discovery that had him tugging on Berenger's hand a few hours later and dragging him deep into the coupling gardens. I can't believe you've never visited the coupling gardens. Do you feel no desires at all? Come on. Ansel, I don't think that... Look, it's those flowers from that boring poem that you like, Ansel announced proudly. He stood in front of the spray of white flowers. Berenger had stopped. The flowers were night blooming, filling the air with a delicate scent. His eyes took in the sight. Then after a moment, he moved forward to touch one of them gently. You're right, said Berenger. They're very beautiful. And rare. In the poem, the lover is given only a single flower. What a terrible gift. I'd much rather have jewelry, said Ansel, wrinkling his nose. Or clothes. Even the horse was better. Berenger's mouth quirked, his eyes shifting from the flowers, amused and warm. Yes, you're a little more expensive. What is happening to me today? What? Yeah, fondness. It's fondness. It's the fondness. It's the fondness that does you in every time. And by you, I might mean me. It's the fondness. Since Berenger preferred serious conversation, Ansel organized a few small evening gatherings for their rooms with only a few of Berenger's closer acquaintances as guests, commissioning restrained performances of music and recitation. Of course, Ansel aspired to a truly great contract, but he was enjoying life on Berenger's arm. He told himself that he would begin pursuing suitors of his own soon. Spying Berenger on the balcony of their rooms one night, Ansel went out to stand beside him, leaning on the balustrade and looking out into dark gardens twinkling with lamps. You really enjoy it here, don't you? Said Berenger. Why? It's everything, said Ansel. All the most elegant fashions, the most powerful people. Here you're important. It's not like a small village where you can never affect the world. I like feeling... like part of it. He does not say this out loud. Like part of it. Like the master of it. Like he had power over the men. Like if they wanted him, they had to pay a fortune for it. Like he was more valuable than the wine goblet Berenger held, or the silver pitcher a servant had poured from. Like he mattered. Perhaps I ought to think of it more like that. How do you think of it? I think, said Berenger, that the only person in this place who shows me their real face is you. Literally, the only thing I'm mad at this point is that this wasn't just a full spin-off novel. How dare you, St. Especan? How absolutely dare you? Ansel could be useful to Berenger in other ways. That was a pet's role, too. When Councillor Herode entered the crowded great hall a few nights later, Ansel saw Berenger's eyes follow him, before Berenger looked up at the dais where the regent sat and frowned slightly. What is it? Said Ansel. He said it quietly, his hand on Berenger's arm, drawing him away from the scattering of courtiers and pets. Ansel had just filched a sweetmeat from Lord Droit, saying, "Your pet is too slow," to the delight of Lord Droit and the anger of the pet he had with him, a storm cloud in blue silk. After a moment, Berenger answered him in a low voice, "I would like to speak privately with the councillor. I wish I could arrange it." Berenger's eyes were still on the gray-haired man across the hall. Eventually, he looked back at Ansel. I can arrange it, said Ansel. He raised his brows when Beringer gave him a skeptical look. I can make everyone look at me. There was the familiar frown, like an old friend. Ansel, I told you I don't want... Ansel was already moving to pick up one of the short banner poles that decorated the hall. Unhooking the banner, he twirled the stick in his hand. Oh, do you do tricks as well? Said Lord Joy. Would you like to see one? Said Ansel. He threw the stick to Lord Joy, who caught it adeptly. A few heads began to turn towards him. I think every man here wants to see what you can do, said Lord Joy. Take off your jacket, said Ansel. More heads turned. He saw Beringer nod once, briefly, then melt into the crowd. Lord Joy was laughing, but he was also gesturing to his own pet to come and unlace his jacket. Ansel could feel the attention, like bright sunlight on his skin. You don't need it back, do you? Said Ansel. I suppose not. Ansel tore the jacket right down the middle. There were a few gasps and laughter again from Lord Joy, who said, I hope there's more to this trick. Throw me back the stick, said Ansel. By now a small crowd had gathered. Ansel caught the stick one-handed. Deftly he wrapped the torn fabric of Lord Joy's jacket around each end. He stepped back, tipping a lamp and soaking the wads of Lord Joy's jacket with lamp oil. Then he touched each end to the fire. Gasps as they burst into flame, and Ansel tossed the stick high, a spinning wheel of dangerous light. He saw faces lit up with flame, shock and delight at his audacity, childlike pleasure at the spectacle. He saw Beringer moving across to the far side of the hall, Councillor Herode leaning in to murmur to him. He knew how he looked. Red and red and red. I need to have a meeting with C.S. Picard about prose. It was not so different to a planned performance, the ends of the sticks alight with fire. He caught his first toss, compensating for the different weight of the jacket. He knew what happened when sticks dropped in performance, the omnipresent danger of the fire, the fuel-soaked wicks, the flammable silks he wore, the long fall of his hair. That was part of the thrill, sensuality, and danger. He had everyone's attention now. He tossed and twirled, and it was easy, all of it coming back to him, his childhood days before his profession had changed, before the escalating series of favors, until the moment he had finally agreed to it. You have to pay me extra. It's my first time. Man, we were having fun, okay? We were fine. We were having a perfectly lovely time. Jeez. But the improvised fire stick quickly sputtered and went out. Ansel caught it between its blackened, smoking ends and tossed a challenging look at Lord Joy. Your jacket's burned out, said Ansel. Shall we try your pants next? Laughter. Applause. Pardon me. Delight. Hand them over, Lord Joy, someone called. More laughter. You're full of talents, aren't you? Said a boy's voice. And Ansel turned. The boy was very lovely and very young, with huge blue eyes and a tumble of brown curls. Ansel knew him. Everyone knew him. The most famous pet in the court. Nicaise had never spoken to him before, and didn't look pleased to be speaking to him now. Ansel lifted his eyes and saw that on the far side of the hall, the regent was watching them. The patron embassy arrives next week, said Nicaise. A fire dance is the perfect entertainment. The regent likes your skills and hopes you'll perform. That's my message. It would be my honor, said Ansel. Since you like to play with fire, said Nicaise. Ansel's pulse hadn't settled when Berenger returned, his blood beating with success. He threw his arms around Berenger's neck and said, "Did you see? I'm a triumph." Berenger took the opportunity provided by physical closeness to say in a low voice, "You have helped me a great deal tonight." "I told you I could make everyone look at me," said Ansel. "Even the regent." That was a half page, by the way. Maybe a little bit more when taking in the couple of sentences on the previous page, but that was less than a page. That was a lot. And less than a page. Holy God. Oh, man. The rumors started right away. The swirling interest around Ansel now had a malicious edge. Ansel was an upstart, a cheap brothel prostitute. Ansel was mercenary. He'd do anything for a contract. Ansel was dangerous, with a dark past. Ansel liked it, a sign of success. He knew the pets at court disliked that a newcomer had been singled out for royal attention. In the relaxed, wine-loosened atmosphere after meals, courtiers liked to indulge. Men and women dallied with their pets, the atmosphere disinhibited and carnal. And they talked, tittering, needling, speculating, the pets in particular raking the hall with their eyes, looking for any new subject of dissection. Ansel liked being the center of attention, but thanks to Berenger, there was a line of attack that had never been there before. "I've heard that Berenger likes women, and that he disappears sometimes from court so that he can..." Ansel flushed. He left the main hall and made straight for Berenger, who was sitting in an adjoining antechamber on one of the long reclining couches amid a handful of acquaintances, talking in small, relaxed groups. "Kiss me," said Ansel as he settled, one knee on the couch on either side of Berenger's thighs, his hands linked behind Berenger's neck. "What?" said Berenger. "On the mouth," said Ansel. "What are people saying?" Berenger said after a long moment. Ansel's flush deepened. He was unable to keep the reaction from his face. He didn't answer. Berenger continued to look at him searchingly. Then Berenger turned his head in a brief glance at the small knot of people standing near them, and gave a little grimace. He leaned in and kissed Ansel a moment later. Ansel felt the kiss against his lips, with Berenger's hand on his waist. It lasted a second or two before Berenger drew back. Ansel could see people watching, overly conscious of the glances, the whispered words, the oily rumors that would begin to surface, like those swirling around the prince. "Everyone's watching. Do it like you mean it," said Ansel. Berenger was beginning to frown. Ansel thought, with a burst of irritation, "I know you don't want to, but can't you just pretend?" How hard was it? Ansel pretended all the time. Berenger had a reputation to maintain, but if Ansel said that, Berenger would probably reply with something idiotic like his own reputation didn't matter to him. Ansel said, "My value goes down if people think I'm not holding your attention." For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Berenger tightened his grip on Ansel's waist and kissed him. It was a shock to feel Berenger's tongue in his mouth. He wasn't expecting a real kiss, even though he had asked for it, and it surprised and unbalanced him. Berenger was usually so reserved. Or perhaps it had simply been a long time since Ansel had kissed anyone. He was no longer used to it. It didn't feel impersonal. He was instead extremely conscious that it was Berenger that he was kissing. When Berenger pulled back, Ansel was straddling Berenger's lap, looking down at him. He was still struggling to process his over-awareness of Berenger, the staid, serious man who preferred reading to talking. His lips were tingling from kissing Berenger, and that didn't seem to make sense. "Ansel," said Berenger. "Like you mean it," said Ansel, and kissed him again. I'm so livid this isn't a full spin-off novel. Where even am I? All right. Ansel was good at kissing. He knew how to make it feel good and how to make it look good. He kissed with expertise, subtly coaxing for more, even as he positioned his body to look its best to anyone who was watching. "My lord," he said, and he sounded turned on, which was how he was supposed to sound. "Berenger." The kiss deepened. Ansel closed his eyes. He could imagine exactly what Berenger liked, love-making in the dark with a young man in a plain shirt. If they ever, Ansel would have to feign at least a degree of innocence, physically experienced but emotionally unprepared, looking up at Berenger and saying it's never been like this before. He imagined that. Imagined Berenger kissing him in private. A strange, shaky feeling grew in him. Berenger would kiss with the same seriousness as he was now. He probably fucked like that too, strong and steady. Berenger's voice in his ear roughened. "You're so good at faking it." "I know," said Ansel. "I know I'm good." He slid his own hand lower to the lacings over Berenger's crotch, and in the next moment Berenger was pulling him up and towards one of the private bowers in the coupling gardens. Ansel stumbled after him. "What?" "What?" Leafy vines and branches sheltered them, the small space dim and secluded. Berenger pushed him in. Ansel half expected Berenger to crowd him against the ironwork. He could smell the crushed leaves and the heady scents from the flowers. He felt hot and confused, and there was something drumming in his head that had never been there before. "I'm going to die." He looked back at Berenger, opened his mouth to say he didn't know what, but before he could, "How long do we have to stay here?" Berenger said. "What?" said Ansel. "How long do you normally take?" said Berenger. It took a moment before he understood the words and their meaning. But the way Berenger was standing off from him, like a man who had had his evening interrupted for a charade in which he has little interest, made everything clear. Ansel pushed down the feelings in his chest, closing his eyes briefly. "At least half an hour. I have a reputation to maintain." "All right," said Berenger, and stood there, awkwardly. Ansel heard himself say, "Unless, do you want..." He doesn't say this next. "Me. Do you want me?" He thought he could make Berenger like it. Ansel knew how to please men. It would be the least he could do, and wouldn't it be better than standing about awkwardly for half an hour? They could go back to kissing, and more than kissing, and Ansel could go to his knees and pleasure Berenger in the way he knew best. "I think we both know this isn't working," Berenger said in a low voice. This, said Ansel. Berenger wasn't looking at him. I'll pay out your time in full. We can separate after you perform for the patron delegation. You can tell people your contract simply came to the end of its time. You're ending our contract, said Ansel. He heard Berenger's voice as if from a distance, the cool evening air of the gardens against his hot skin. The sound of the breeze and the leaves seemed loud, and he was too conscious of the rise and fall of his chest. Everyone will want you after your performance. You won't have trouble finding men to bid for you. I know, said Ansel. I'm the best pet at this court. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I thought anyway, as we went into the break, I was like, oh great, just a story where I get to just be gagged the whole time. Oh, this is so fun. 'Cause I just didn't, and I don't know why. Why didn't I expect her to do this to me? I feel so silly right now. Me, of all people. That was the end of the chapter. We're on we're on page, I can't even think. We're on page 131 for chapter 4. I just... He didn't know why, but the next day when Ansel saw Berenger talking in a low voice to Lord Droy's pet, it made him angry, and he stalked out of the stuffy, overlit rooms into the cool shade of the gardens. No, I must keep going. Inside, people were thronging and gossiping wildly at the latest outrage from the prince. Here there were only pleasing lamps, not the blazing bright of 1,000 candles, and Ansel could think. There were plenty of lords at court wealthier and higher in status than Berenger. Ansel could get any of them. But that wasn't a triumph. He had come here to rise to the top. He heard footsteps behind him. Berenger. He turned. It wasn't Berenger. It was the ambassador to Vask, her face familiar to him from a dozen evening entertainments. Ansel knew her sculptured style of dress well, the Vaskian elements she incorporated into her clothing. She had the straight-backed posture and poise of a woman used to power. Lady Van, he said. She was regarding him. He thought of saying something risky and flirtatious, that she should not be alone with him, thinking of the scandal and excitement of it. But she wasn't alone. Her Vaskian pet was alongside her, stern-faced and decked out in heavy gold. Van spoke. You and Berenger are utterly mismatched, and you're clearly ambitious. I hope you won't hurt him too badly when you move on. Ansel pushed himself away from the garden railing and dipped his lashes prettily. I wouldn't be a very good pet if I didn't break at least a few hearts. She seemed to like this reply. Perhaps your next conquest will know what to do with you. A small party of courtiers was approaching. Ansel frowned. Berenger was still with Lord Droy's pet. At least no one knew that Berenger was the one dissolving his contract. Everyone would think that what Van thought, that Berenger couldn't hold Ansel and Ansel was moving on to someone better. His whole purpose in coming here had been to secure a brilliant contract. Now he needed to do that. Ansel thought of the impossible. For pets, it was epitomized by one man, the prince. The prince who had never taken a pet. The prince who had never taken anyone, or been taken, so they said. They said he was frigid, that he had ice in his veins, that pets failed to interest him. But there was one person who had the prince's complete attention. Ansel's gaze swung around the gardens, and in the bower on the corner, he saw the prince's slave. Wait! Wait! He was kneeling, muscles rippling, tied to the post with the flimsiest chain, the dark curls of his head bent. Someone had chained him up and left him alone, with no handlers. Oh my God! By the time Berenger and the others arrived, Ansel knew exactly what he was going to do. "Let's take a turn around the garden," said Ansel, smiling sweetly at Berenger, taking his arm in place of Lord Droy's pet. He led the group, let their path wind slowly down the paths toward the bower where there were fewer lamps and the sounds were less. They strolled with the others, Van, Lord Droy, Berenger, and their pets, a party of 6, until they came to the bower that held the prince's slave. The slave was more frightening close up, and bigger. Physically imposing and dripping with disdainful pride, he looked as though he could break any handlers in half. He was nothing like a court pet. It was as if the other courtiers were playing with kittens while the prince had brought in a lion. Ansel halted in front of the bower deliberately. The prince's slave wasn't alone. There was another slave with him, a blond, slender, wide-eyed young man, also from Achielos. The 2 slaves were caught up in one another, conversing quietly amid the dimly lit greenery. As Ansel watched, the blond slave lifted his hand gently to the face of the prince's slave, tipping it up. "Don't stop on our account," said Ansel. They sprang apart. The younger blonde slave pressed his forehead submissively to the floor, a pose that seemed designed to make you want to step on his head. Ansel found himself unaccountably irritated by the passivity. The prince's slave moved back on his knees, only far enough to rake them all with a scathing look. Ansel looked down at him coolly. Another minute or 2 and we might have caught them kissing. Berenger was frowning. The prince's slave stayed where he was, with the air of one tolerating an intrusion that would be gone soon. He looked scornful and unimpressed when his eyes passed briefly over Ansel, Berenger, and Van. His only movement was to shift slightly, a rearrangement of muscle. He was chained to... I can't believe this is fucking happening. He was chained to the metalwork of the bower with a delicate gold chain. Ansel remembered that this slave had knocked a fighter unconscious in the ring, that he had put hands on the prince in the baths, then attacked him in the great hall. If he stood up, that tiny chain wouldn't hold. "I think it's more exciting now that we know he's really dangerous," said Ansel. "Councillor Guillaume suggested that he wasn't trained to perform as a pleasure slave," said Lady Van. "But training isn't everything. He might have natural talent." "Natural talent," said the prince. He strolled up, coolly. Ansel had to force himself not to turn, his heart racing wildly as he bowed with the others. When he looked up, the prince was right there, the closest Ansel had been to royalty. Arriving in the bower, the Prince of Ver was instantly commanding, with nothing soft or yielding in him. A young man with golden hair, cold blue eyes, and an arresting profile. He had a pet's looks and a prince's bearing, laced up tighter than Berenger, in dark, severe clothing. He looked capable of mastering the slave through force of will, as though the slave's discomfort was his pleasure. "I'd happily perform with him," Ansel announced. The prince didn't react, his eyes on the slave. "Ansel, no, he could hurt you." Ansel ignored Berenger and spoke to the shoulders and back of the prince. "That was Berenger! Oh, God. I need to breathe. I haven't been breathing. We all just need to breathe, okay? We all just need to breathe. Are we holding hands? We should be holding hands. Please, dear God. Oh, Jesus. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Where am I? I don't know. Jesus Christ. Would you like that? Berenger frowned. No, I wouldn't. What do you think, Your Highness? Said Ansel. The prince turned, and Ansel found himself the sole subject of the prince's attention. I think your master would prefer you intact, said the prince. You could tie the slave up. He saw the moment the prince took in the idea. There was something more in the prince's eyes, something private, though it was only there for a moment, before the prince's expression hardened. Why not? The two handlers began to move towards the slave. They were going to restrain him further because he was dangerous. Ansel looked Berenger right in the eyes. Tell me how you want me to fuck him. I don't want you to fuck him, said Berenger. I do, said Ansel. I want to do it with you watching. You mean with the prince watching, Berenger didn't say. Instead, Berenger frowned in that way that he had, turned to the handlers, and gave some instructions about safety. Ansel barely heard him, only half aware of the flurry of activity, the preparations being made. Drawn by the rarity of the spectacle, a few other courtiers had drifted over, and then a few more, a small audience gathering. Servants approached, distributing refreshments. The clink of glassware and serving trays seemed too loud. Ansel didn't need Berenger. He was going to do it with the prince's slave in front of everyone. No other pet had ever won the prince's attention. Because the tiny gold chain was not strong enough, handlers had secured the prince's slave to the bench, where he was positioned with his wrists cuffed to the metalwork above his head, his torso one long line of muscle, his legs spread. The slave's eyes lifted to meet Ansel's for a moment, radiating fury, before he turned the full force of it on the prince, who just stared back at him coldly. And then it was time. Everyone was taking their seats on the bower benches, and Ansel was approaching the slave with all eyes on him. Close to, the slave was a dominating presence, the long muscles of his thighs bunching as Ansel knelt between them. Ansel remembered the trail of blood in the arena, and adrenaline spiked his pulse higher. This slave had clubbed his opponent to the ground in the ring. He wasn't a court pet, or a brothel client. He and Achielin, named for the Achielin prince killer. Ansel could see, as he put his hands on those thighs, that the slave disliked him. That was irritating. Did he think Ansel was salivating to suck his cock? Pets had to do things they didn't like all the time. Ansel leaned forward and wrapped his hand around it. It was big, and not hard yet. It had been a long time since Ansel had given head, thanks to Berenger's prudery. It was disconcerting, uncomfortable at first, like he didn't want to be this close or put his mouth on it. He pushed past the feeling. He was good at this. He knew what to do and how to do it. The uncomfortable feeling grew. The slave was too stupid to realize he was supposed to be performing. He was slow to rouse, half-hard and unmoving. How had he ever achieved a court position with skills this poor? Wasn't he trying at all? And then came the cool words, I wonder if we can do better than this. Stop. Ansel felt the slave jerk, his cock hardening as the prince settled himself on the bower seat alongside them. Now there's a telltale detail I don't think we very specifically and explicitly got in the book. I'm simply at wit's end. Where am I? There I am. Ansel shifted as the prince's shiny boot extended out right next to him. He looked up and saw that the prince's eyes were on the slave, while the slave sat with his jaw clenched, his face turned away. You're more likely to win a game if you don't play your whole hand at once, the prince said. Start more slowly. Like this. The wait was deliberate to make the prince say it. Like that, Ansel clasped his hands behind his back, mostly for show, and used his mouth only, bowing his head to tongue the slit. Fully hard now, the slave was bigger than any Ansel had taken. He likes that. Do it harder. He felt the slave jerk again. Heard the new hitch in his breathing. He did like that, tugging unconsciously on his restraints as Ansel, on the prince's instructions, began to slowly suckle the head. Take it all the way down, said the prince, and Ansel took it deep into his throat. Not quite all of it. He heard the slave say something in Achiellan. It sounded like a swear word. Ansel half expected the prince's hand on his head, pushing him down the last inch, but when he glanced up, neither of the men were paying him any attention. Their eyes locked on one another. He came up without coughing or needing a breath, a cultivated skill that was often admired. He might not have had bigger, but he'd had a lot, and began the performance in earnest, the repeating up and down, angling his body to the side a little to let the onlookers see better, moaning to indicate pleasure. All of it, said the prince, and Ansel went down again until he managed all of it, his entire throat, a vessel. The prince, sitting casually on the bower seat, continued giving instructions. The slave eventually began panting, and after a while started thrusting of his own volition. When that happened, Ansel had no control over it, other than to open his throat. It didn't matter that the prince didn't seem to pay him any attention, or that he was only a conduit. The slave wasn't even looking at him. It was what he wanted, what he was good at. Finish him off, said the prince, who rose, walking away in disinterest even before the end of his last instruction. It blurred a little after that, Ansel picking up the pace, the slave jerking, his body curving over itself, unable to hold back the sound as he came. Ansel swallowed before he realized what he was doing, a hazy instinct. The slave was panting, looking up through a tangle of curls in a furious way, as though he'd like to have a second go-around, this time with his hand around someone's throat. But he wasn't looking at Ansel at all. He lifted that gaze and fixed it right on the prince. The two of them were locked together, Ansel utterly forgotten as he rose unsteadily to his feet. His throat felt abraded. Everyone was fussing over him. Courtiers crowded around with accolades, comments, and congratulations. You really are the perfect pet, and I've never seen anyone take it like that, and I'd pay a fortune for you. Berenger had him by the arm and was pulling him aside, tugging him away so that he was being ushered into the privacy of a second bower before he could resist. He remembered the last time Berenger had pulled him into a bower. He remembered what he thought had been going to happen. Ansel could feel his own bruised, reddened lips. He could still taste the thick salt of it, feel the roughened thrusts. Berenger had a hand on his shoulder and was staring into his face. Ansel lifted his chin. Did he hurt you? The words were short. I liked it, said Ansel. I like sucking cock. I'm a pet. For a moment, they gazed at each other. Wild to put that loaded phrase immediately after this. For a moment they gazed at each other before Berenger let go his shoulder. I'm sorry, said Berenger, that your stunt didn't work out the way you planned. Who says it didn't? Everyone's talking about me, said Ansel. It's what I want. That's a scene break. Hi, Jesus Christ. Okay. The unlit fire stick smelled of lamp oil, and it was heavy, the soaked, weighted cloth wrapped around each end providing a wick. It was ready, as Ansel was ready, waiting in an antechamber adjoining the great hall. He wore gauzy, ephemeral silks, of the kind that would flash burn in an instant if he made a mistake with the flame. His face was painted to highlight his lips and his green eyes, and he wore his hair flowing and out. Red, the color of fire, the color of the Regency. The similarity was deliberate. The Regent's going to call on you to attend him at dinner. The familiar boy's voice that piped behind him was not yet broken by puberty. Ansel turned to look at Nicaise, really look at his big blue eyes and his beautifully curled hair, and the long earring too heavy for the young face. If you do one thing. Ansel could glimpse the great hall through the door behind Nicaise. Dinner was ending, and people had begun to move on to the next part of the evening, mingling, entertainments. Among the courtiers, pets, servants, heralds, retinues, and guards. There were 3 princes inside. Torvald, Prince of Patras, Laurent, Prince of Vere, and the regent, the most powerful man at court, who sat in command of it all. "Attend him," said Ansel. "It's easy. You have fire. The blonde slave doesn't like fire." Nicaise pointed with his chin through the archway to where a handler was bringing a blonde slave into the antechamber with them, drawing him forward by a chain attached to the collar on his neck. It was the blonde slave from the Bower, the insipid, spineless creature who made you want to pinch his skin or shake him to wake up, like a useless doe in a forest, expecting someone else to help him. With looks like that, the blonde slave could have owned this court if he'd put any work into it. Instead, he was trembling and helpless and waiting for a rescue that was never going to come. It was irritating. Then the regent will... Excuse me, I was just too caught up in Erasmus. Then the regent will call you to attend him. Everyone will see you sitting with him. That's what you want, isn't it? The bid for your contract will go up. A whole night with the regent. Ansel twirled the stick. Aren't you jealous? I'm not jealous, said Nicaise. You're old. That was another scene break. To Ansel's disbelief, Prince Torvald liked the slave. The night started well. Every pair of eyes in the hall was on him, admiring, even before he tipped the sticks into the fire and they burst into flame. Ansel knew from the first toss of the sticks that the performance was a triumph, the fire like liquid light in his hands. He felt like he was part of the fire, beautiful and strong and full of dangerous heat. It was like holding power in his hands, his body supple and responsive, tossing the sticks higher and higher, spinning them, bright and hot. Riotous cheers broke out as he finished, panting slightly, feeling the triumph of the movement pumping in his blood, and then the blonde slave was brought in by a handler. Nicaise was right. Ansel didn't have to do very much, just approach with the sticks, twirling them lightly. Just the heat made the slave balk, pulling against his chain like a horse pulling on its lead rope. He had to be dragged forward, which made him choke, the chain pulling at the collar around his neck. He looked terrified. It made Ansel angry. This mewling creature who had been brought to court and lavished with every opportunity that Ansel had worked for was doing nothing to advance his own career, even now. The power of context. But in the next moment, Prince Torvald was calling the slave over and, rather than booting him out of the hall, was fussing over him, talking to him, stroking his tousled blonde head. Ansel gaped. Prince Torvald was taking the slave into his household. For what? For being too weak to survive at court? The unfairness was terrible. If Ansel had wanly lain down and waited for a rescuer, he would have died in the street. He put the sticks out, the smoke thick and acrid, and returned to his own table. Berenger was looking at him with sickened eyes. What you did was not your business, said Ansel. I'm nothing to do with you after tonight." As he spoke, a liveried servant approaching their table said, "Ansel, the Regent of Vere requests your company." He stood. The insipid blonde slave wasn't the only one who had won himself royal attention. Ansel walked right up to the dais that led to the regent's chair, kneeling and then rising at the regent's gesture, looking up past the robes edged in ermine to the face of the most powerful man at court. He was older than Berenger, by perhaps 10 years. Not older than Luan. Ansel had certainly entertained older men than this. It was difficult to think of other men when standing before the regent, whose power gave him an authority others lacked. Tonight he was dressed in red, the rich royal color flattering his looks, wide powerful shoulders and dark hair still mostly untouched by silver. The regent had a trimmed beard, different to the clean-shaven look his nephew preferred. He had heavy jeweled rings on his fingers and a thick gold and ruby chain of office around his neck. He gestured for Ansel to step forward. "Come, sit." There was nowhere to sit. Ansel stepped up and simply straddled the regent's lap, twining arms around the man's neck. He heard the murmurs as he did it, and lifted his chin brazenly. He met the regent's gaze, his body language like a claim, like ownership. "You are exotic, aren't you?" said the regent, and touched his hair. "Red, like the regency." "I'm one of a kind, your highness," said Ansel. The other title was on his lips, "Your Majesty." The regent felt like a king. The regent's other arm settled about his waist. "Tell me about your master," the regent said. "Lord Berenger." "He's boring," said Ansel. "Serious, loyal." "Loyal to my nephew," said the regent. He spoke pleasantly, tweaking Ansel's hair as he did so. The sharp tug hurt. "Loyal to the throne." Ansel's heart had started beating faster. "I've heard he's met with my nephew several times. What was discussed?" "I couldn't say. I wasn't there for the meetings." He kept his tone light. "So there were meetings." His mouth felt dry suddenly, and it was hard to swallow. He thought of Berenger in the hall somewhere behind him, wondered if Berenger was looking at him, though he probably wasn't. "No, I mean that I don't know. I don't know what meetings he's taken." "Oh dear." The tone was disappointed. "I thought you were clever." The regent shifted, forcing Ansel to reposition awkwardly. He was motioning for one of the servants to approach, looking past Ansel as though he was done with him. "I am." Ansel's heart was pounding. "You just haven't asked the right question." "And what's that?" said the regent. "If I'm loyal," said Ansel. "And are you?" said the regent. "Very," said Ansel. "To the highest bidder. That's what a pet is." He made his words soft, like velvet. "Berenger owns my contract today, but tomorrow—" "I admire your enterprise," said the regent. "Look around this court. I'll arrange a contract with whoever you like." The servant had arrived, with a silver tray full of sweets. The regent took one, then held it between thumb and forefinger in front of Ansel's lips. "If you're good." Ansel leaned in and ate the sweet from the regent's fingers. He did it holding the regent's gaze. The regent smiled and brushed some powdered sugar from Ansel's lips with his thumb. "Your pet is very obliging," said the regent, as he returned Ansel to Berenger at the end of the night. "We've spent a wonderful night talking." "Your Highness." Berenger bowed low. His face was wiped of all expression. They walked back to Berenger's rooms together in silence. Ansel didn't take his arm, as had been his custom. It was late enough that there was no one in the passages or on the stairs. Ansel could hear the echo of every step. Their presence seemed unbearably loud, though Berenger said nothing to him at all. Inside their rooms, Berenger dismissed him with a shake of his head. Ansel watched him turn away, watched him enter the darkened part of the rooms that held his bed, beginning to unlace his own jacket. I didn't tell him anything. The words were a blurt, delivered to the back of Berenger's shoulders. Berenger's movement came to a halt. What do you mean? About you and the prince, that you've been meeting secretly each night, that you're taking his side, that you've offered him funding and passage through Varennes. I didn't tell him any of that. I thought that you... Berenger turned. Berenger was across the room, his hands on Ansel's arms, gripping him tightly, his eyes boring into Ansel's. Stop it. You're spoiling my clothes. I didn't tell him. I told you. I didn't tell him anything. Berenger didn't let go. Berenger's eyes were searching his face. How do you know about any of that? Just because I like nice things and don't read boring books like you doesn't mean that I'm This isn't a game, Ansel. I'm trying to secure my future. I need to go somewhere after you end my contract. The regent's the most powerful man at court. Why shouldn't I try to better myself? But I wouldn't tell him anything about you. You've always been generous. You gave me gifts, and I thought you... Berenger released him roughly and moved 2 steps off. So that's it. You want gifts, Berenger said in a flat, deadly voice. Are you trying to blackmail me for money? Ansel felt his mouth turn to sand. No. Berenger didn't turn back to face him. There are lives at stake. I'll give you whatever you want to keep my dealings private. I told you I didn't tell him anything. I wouldn't. I was your pet. I don't want your money like that. Ansel's chest hurt. Berenger turned as Ansel said the last words, and when their eyes met, Ansel couldn't look away. Was he going to beg? You must hate me. Hate you, said Berenger. Why would I hate you? You've always been honest with me. You never tried to hide what you were. A whore, said Ansel. Berenger didn't argue. Berenger didn't say anything at all, just looked back at him. Ansel lifted his chin. So what if I am? I'm not ashamed of it. I'm good at it. I can make men want me. His voice felt raw. It just doesn't work on you. He thought, in the silence that followed, that it didn't matter. Tomorrow he would have a new patron. He would go to his room, where he would pack his things, the clothes, the paint, the gifts, and Berenger would be just one more owner, one more man from his past, one more name on a list. There was a hard pressure in his chest that he had to ignore. He would turn and walk away from it. He would move on to the next man and the next. It works on me, said Berenger. Oh. The words in Berenger's honest voice at first didn't make sense. Ansel didn't understand it. It was too close to his own hopes. The look in Berenger's eyes was like the tone in his voice, painfully honest. Ansel's heart was beating wildly. You never wanted me to. Is that what you think? Said Ansel. Yes, said Berenger, steadily. The stark truth of it hung between them. Ansel knew it, and yet he knew also the confusion that he'd felt when Berenger had kissed him, knew the hot, sharp feeling at the thought of Berenger ending his contract. "Don't give me up," said Ansel. "Ansel, I'm going to be supporting the prince's claim to the throne. There's every chance he'll fail. His supporters cast out as traitors. I can't guarantee you a life, a future." Berenger was shaking his head. "If the regent prevails, I won't have money or lands. You should be with someone who can give you the luxuries you deserve, not someone who'll embroil you, and that's why," said Ansel. "That's why you decided to break my contract." He made sense of that much, and he clung to it. He wanted to ask, "Does that mean you're not giving me up because you don't want me?" He didn't know how to ask that. He was usually so good at asking for what he wanted. "Can you honestly tell me that you'd want to stay with me if it meant risking your position?" Berenger said. "If I had no money." "I've never fucked anyone without it being for money." The words came out differently than he'd intended. The painfully straightforward way that Berenger had asked him that question meant that Ansel had given an honest answer. It was Berenger who spoke. "When I saw you in the ring, I thought you were incredible. You were fearless, powerful. You took on every lord in the room and beat them. I couldn't take my eyes off you." "You want me too," said Ansel. "Ansel, when we kissed, yes. I don't care what might happen." He was moving forward because Berenger wanted him. He couldn't keep the way that made him feel out of his voice, the pleasure of it, the new confidence. "You're not poor now. You can afford me." Berenger was shaking his head. "Ansel, I'm not poor now, but if the prince fails..." "If he fails," said Ansel. He was stepping into Berenger's space. He put his hand on the laces of Berenger's jacket, and Berenger didn't move away. "But if he wins..." I was expecting none of that. What? The me, okay, the version of me who looked at what I was reading today and was like, okay, Pet is the longest one, so this one's going to take up like a whole stream. So we're doing Pet today so that we can end with, whatchamacallit, like everybody says, on Tuesday. Cool. So like, what was Pet again? And I literally looked at it and it was like, yeah, Pet, a story of Ansel and Berenger. I was like, who the fuck is Berenger? But whatever, like, Ansel's interesting. We'll just do Ansel. That was the me from 2 hours ago. And I am not the same person. 2 hours ago me? Who was she? Who? I have no idea who that person was. A naive little idiot that person was. But now I have seen, oh my god, who's the person that came into this utterly obsessed with them? somebody in the chat was like particularly obsessed and was really excited because we all got to see like why they were obsessed. Couscous! Really? Couscous! Couscous? You knew, man. You knew, and you are right. I'm gonna rip off my own arm. You are right. You are dead ass right. You are correct. Gnawing at your enclosure over these two is the correct response to that bullshit. It's past 5. I have to go. Like, throw myself into a wall. Or something. Jesus Christ. So, next time we're reading Erasmus. We're reading Erasmus, and then we're ending with The Adventures of Charles, because everyone says that should be the one you end on. So next time we're starting with Erasmus, and we're ending with Charles, and Tuesday, the next stream, will be the actual end to Captive Prince. And then in a week or so, I have it scheduled in to my filming stuff to make a video about C.S. Picot's interviews and breaking down things and all that extra stuff. I'll be doing that for patrons over on the Patreon. So that's what's happening. My brain has been melted from the inside. There's nothing left up here. So I hope you have a great weekend. I'm gonna go, and I'll be back on Tuesday to finish The Captive Prince. It just now occurred to me that I entirely forgot to do the giveaway. So it's good that we have one more Captive Prince stream left. My apologies if you don't know what I'm talking about, and you would like to win the Captive Prince trilogy and the books that I've read. You can still enter, because I'm silly sometimes. You can comment on this stream down below, not in the chat, in an actual comment, and I will include any entries that may or may not pop up on this stream as well when I actually do the giveaway on Tuesday. I entirely forgot. That's my bad. My apologies. But at least, we have the giveaway on the last stream, kind of like we always planned. I'm going. I'm gone. I love you all very much. Please take care of yourselves. I'm gonna go reread this, and I'll see you on Tuesday, all right? Okay. All right. I love you very, very much.